We are at Pleb Urban Winery in the River Arts District of Asheville, North Carolina. This was an area that was built with industry in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and because of some flooding was abandoned, and several of the industries moved to higher ground. And now they have a group that has restored the area since the early 1990s, and several businesses have thrived in the area, especially some local art galleries and wineries and food places. We just finished up at Pleb and we really enjoyed it. We had a good time with Chris and everybody inside. We ended up coming home with a bottle of wine. This is the Foundy White, and we had several wines that we really enjoyed. This one came home with us, and thanks so much to Chris and to all the staff for being so kind to us and to letting us ask so many questions and giving us great footage. And subscribe, like, and ring the bell, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, I'm Chris Denisha. I am one of the co-owners and winemaker grower here at Pleb Urban Winery. And yeah, what we're doing here is making local wine using local grapes with minimum intervention, with a focus on the grapes that do well, that maybe aren't as mainstream as most wine drinkers usually associate. So vinifera is the type of species that most people are familiar with: Cab Sauv, Chardonnay, Cab Franc, Petit Manseng. We're working with Catawba, Concord, Traminette, Vidal Blanc, Chambourcin. Stuff that tends to grow a little bit better here in our climate, meaning that we get a little bit more reliable crop, we get higher consistency in the grapes, which requires less effort by our farmers in the vineyard, which means that they make more profit. So instead of growing something that requires a whole lot of time, a whole lot of chemical, we're trying to empower them to plant the right grapes, or the grapes we deem better suited for their sites, and then bring them here to Asheville to make wines, and then kind of interact with our community here and our local community and say, hey, this is what we're growing well, this is what we're trying, work with us to figure out what our wine identity in the mountains is, what the best kind of wine we're trying to make is going to be, and interface. Because we also know that this process takes years and years, decades and generations. So that's one of the other big things that's different than a lot of other industries, is we're embracing the fact that in order to not only establish and find what grapes grow best, because we only get one harvest a year, it's not like, oh, that didn't do well, let's order some more and try it again next week or next month. We get one shot every 12 months. And so it's very much like a partnership with the community to say, like, hey, bear with us, it's gonna take a while, but we're gonna have fun while we do it, and we figure out our own type of wine culture, grape identity, using the stuff that was here before us and hopefully will be here long after us.
So what year did you start this business?
Our first harvest here was in 2018.
And when did you serve your first glass of wine?
It was in 2018.
What's your personal favorite?
My personal favorite is our sparkling program, which we honestly have not released anything yet, because we're taking more of a non-vintage, consistent, traditional method. We're calling it the Appalachian method, with our own spin, in the same way people in Champagne weren't handed the Champagne method on gold tablets from God. They had to trial, error, figure things out. We're embracing that, using our own concrete, our own wood, our own resources. Most of our tanks here are variable capacity tanks, so that allows us to work with, instead of filling everything up to the top and depending on it or gassing it up, it allows us to work with, one of our growers may have very little grapes to sell us that year. So instead of being hamstringed on bulking things up or inconsistent qualities, it allows us to drop the lids on top and preserve the wine a little bit more consistently. Over here we have our tap system. So we sell a lot of our wine, basically all the wine here on site. A lot of it is barreled, but we also have this mobile system called Keg Foo, which allows us to be a little bit more sustainable. And the wine consumed here is served via keg. So it's the same stuff that's bottled, except we put them in much larger bottles. And we have specific gas blends to basically, we can have a sparkling wine at, 38 degrees right next to a red wine at 54, with a beer right next to that, with a cider right next to that, all at varying temperatures. We work with neutral French oak barrels. We've ordered some local barrels in the past. They had a hard time holding wine. So basically we work with the 225 liter neutral oak. So our point in using neutral oak, which a lot of people will kind of figure out, is our wines aren't very oaky. And the reasoning behind that is to establish and figure out what our wines really taste like and smell like without oak influence before we start integrating some of the oak characteristics into the wines.
So where's the origin of
these are all French oak barrels. So France, one of the main differences between French and American oak is it grows a little bit slower, tends to have a tighter grain, slower permeability. Wine ferments, there's yeast particles, and as the yeast starts to die off, it settles to the bottom. And if you have a healthy lees colony, you can leave it on that. And what that will do is it'll start to break down and add body and texture to a wine.
Where did your love of wine come from? Where did you start? I know you said you'd been working, but how did you get there?
Yeah, I grew up in the Central Valley of California, where it's all farms, ag, in between Los Angeles and San Francisco. But I went to school up in Sonoma. I just started working in vineyards and at wineries up there, and then one day the growing aspect clicked, and I was actually working at Rodney Strong when that happened. And so I was there for when I was going through college, and then just started traveling, worked in vineyards and farms all over the place. I worked in, like I said, Spain, visited vineyards there, Italy, and just kind of realized, when I was working on a vineyard in Utah, kind of rounded up a lot of the small farmers and growers that don't have wineries, and we said, we'll buy all of your grapes, come to Asheville, because if there's a weird place that's gonna get behind stuff they've never heard of, where a lot of wine drinkers won't even try something, is what's Vidal Blanc, what's Traminette, what's this? We said, Asheville will probably give us a shot. Yeah. So we bring the grapes from Western North Carolina here, we make the wines, we pour them through the taps, we bottle some of them up, and a lot of them leave the state, which is cool. It's kind of cool to see our wines leaving all over the place.
How many different states are you in?
We ship to most, I think 40 something, but